The evening sky had turned a deep purple as Denise Wilson drove home through the quiet streets of Oak Ridge. After a 12-hour shift at Memorial Hospital, her body ached with the familiar exhaustion that came with being a pediatrician, made more intense by the weight of her 8-month pregnant belly pressing against the steering wheel. All she wanted was a hot shower and to feel the comfort of her bed. The flashing blue and red lights in her rearview mirror came without warning. Denise checked her speed, 5 miles under the limit, and signaled to pull over, guiding her sedan carefully to the side of the tree-lined suburban street. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. As a black woman, traffic stops always brought an extra layer of anxiety, something she and her husband had discussed countless times. "It's probably just a broken taillight," she whispered to herself, reaching for her purse to retrieve her license and registration. The baby kicked inside her, as if responding to the sudden spike in her stress hormones. Officer Richard Mercer approached the vehicle with a deliberate slowness that immediately put Denise on edge. His hand rested casually on his holster, a detail she couldn't help but notice as he shined his flashlight directly into her eyes. "License and registration?" he demanded, not bothering with any greeting. "Good evening, officer," Denise replied, her voice steady despite her nerves. She handed over the documents with both hands visible. "May I ask why I've been pulled over?" Officer Mercer ignored her question, studying her license with exaggerated scrutiny. "You're a long way from home, aren't you? What brings you to this neighborhood at this hour?" The question caught Denise off guard. She'd lived in Oak Ridge for nearly 3 years. "I'm not far from home at all, sir. I live just 4 blocks from here on Maple Avenue. I'm coming back from my shift at the hospital." Mercer's expression hardened, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am. Excuse me?" Denise's hand instinctively went to her pregnant belly. "Officer, I'm 8 months pregnant. If I've done something wrong, I'd appreciate knowing what it is," I said. "Step out of the vehicle." His tone sharpened, leaving no room for discussion. "Now." Denise felt a chill run through her body that had nothing to do with the cool spring evening. "Officer, I really don't understand what's happening. I'm a doctor at Memorial. Here's my hospital ID." She reached slowly toward the lanyard hanging from her rearview mirror. In one swift motion, Officer Mercer drew his weapon and pointed it directly at her. "Hands where I can see them." "Don't move." Time seemed to freeze. Denise's world narrowed to the barrel of the gun aimed at her and her unborn child. Her medical training kicked in as she forced herself to take slow, measured breaths, fighting the urge to panic. "Please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm pregnant." "Hi, baby." "Should have thought about your baby before deciding to drive through here." Mercer cut her off. "This neighborhood has had a string of break-ins." A vehicle matching this description was reported. 2 neighbors walking their dogs slowed their pace, watching the scene unfold with growing concern. The woman pulled out her phone and began recording. "Officer, my car is a standard silver Honda Accord. There must be hundreds in this city," Denise reasoned, struggling to keep her voice calm. "I've lived in this neighborhood for years. I'm just trying to get home after work." Mercer seemed unmoved. "Exit the vehicle slowly, hands up." The absurdity and danger of the situation hit Denise all at once. She was being forced at gunpoint to awkwardly maneuver her pregnant body out of her car for no apparent reason, other than driving through her own neighborhood. But the gun remained pointed at her, and fear for her baby overrode everything else. "I'm complying, officer. Please be careful with my baby." She opened the door with trembling hands and slowly, painfully extracted herself from the driver's seat, one hand supporting her lower back by now. Several more neighbors had gathered on their porches and sidewalks. Phones were out, recording the incident. Someone shouted, "She lives here." "What are you doing?" Officer Mercer ignored them, gesturing with his weapon for Denise to move to the side of the road. "Hands against the car, feet back." "Officer, please," Denise pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. "I physically cannot stand like that in my condition. I'm a doctor. I'm not a threat to anyone." A middle-aged woman stepped forward from the growing crowd. "That's Dr. Wilson. She delivered my grandson last year." "What on earth are you doing?" Mercer turned sharply toward the woman. "Stay back." "This is police business." "It's harassment is what it is," someone else called out. Denise felt a contraction grip her abdomen. Not labor, but the stress-induced Braxton Hicks contractions her obstetrician had warned her about. She winced, doubling slightly. Stand up straight, Mercer barked, misinterpreting her movement as defiance. She's pregnant, you idiot. The woman with the dog was indignant now, her phone still recording. Can't you see she's in pain? More neighbors were emerging from their homes, drawn by the commotion. Denise recognized several faces, people she'd waved to on morning jogs before her pregnancy, families whose children she'd treated at the hospital. I need to call my husband, Denise said, trying to keep her breathing steady through another contraction. Please, he works in law enforcement. He can clear this up immediately. A smirk crossed Officer Mercer's face. Oh, your husband's a cop now? That's convenient. His tone dripped with disbelief. Sure, go ahead and call him. He clearly thought she was bluffing. Little did he know that Denise's husband, Anthony Wilson, wasn't just any law enforcement officer. 3 months ago, after 20 years of distinguished service, he had been appointed as the city's first black police chief. The appointment had made headlines, but Officer Mercer, relatively new to the force and recently transferred from another precinct, apparently hadn't made the connection between Dr. Denise Wilson and Chief Wilson. As Mercer began rummaging through her car without permission, Denise pressed her phone to her ear, trying to control her shaking hands enough to dial. Around her, the neighborhood had mobilized. An elderly man offered her his arm for support. A young couple brought her a bottle of water and a folding chair from their porch. You can't just search her car without consent or probable cause, argued a man who introduced himself as a law professor at the local university. This is a clear Fourth Amendment violation. Stay out of police business, Mercer snapped. But Denise noticed a flicker of uncertainty cross his face as he registered the growing crowd and the numerous phones recording his every move. Through her fear and discomfort, Denise felt a wave of gratitude for her neighbors, people standing up for her when she was at her most vulnerable. This was community, the reason she and Anthony had chosen this neighborhood to raise their child. The phone rang in her ear as another contraction gripped her. Denise breathed through it, one hand on her belly, the other clutching the phone like a lifeline. The baby kicked vigorously as if protesting the treatment of its mother. Wilson, came the familiar voice on the other end. Professional and slightly distracted, Anthony. Denise managed, her voice breaking. I need you now. As she began explaining the situation to her husband, Officer Mercer continued his unauthorized search of her vehicle, tossing aside her medical bag with casual disregard for the equipment inside. Her hospital name badge lay discarded on the passenger seat. The photo ID clearly showing Dr. Denise Wilson, head of pediatric emergency care. The neighborhood watch had transformed into a shield of humanity around her, their collective presence providing some measure of protection. They were witnesses, their phones documenting every second of the unfolding injustice. What Officer Mercer didn't realize as he continued his harassment was that he had made 3 critical mistakes that evening. He had targeted an innocent woman simply for the color of her skin. He had chosen to do so in a community that looked out for its own, and he had no idea that the cop husband he had dismissed so easily was at that very moment mobilizing half the police force to come to his wife's aid. In the distance, though still out of earshot, multiple police sirens began to wail. The sirens grew louder as Denise stood trembling by her car, one hand supporting her swollen belly. Officer Mercer continued his search, tossing items from her glove compartment onto the passenger seat. His movements became increasingly frantic as more neighbors gathered, their phone cameras capturing every moment of the unjustified stop. I asked you a question, Mercer snapped, returning to where Denise stood surrounded by concerned residents. What are you really doing in this neighborhood? The elderly man who had offered Denise his arm earlier stepped forward. She lives here, for heaven's sake. I've been her neighbor for 3 years. Stay out of this, sir, Mercer warned, his hand hovering near his holster. This is police business. It's harassment, called out a woman in scrubs who had just pulled up in her own car. She rushed toward Denise. Dr. Wilson? I was just finishing my shift at Memorial when I got 3 texts about this. Are you okay? Denise recognized her, Tamika, one of the night shift nurses from pediatrics. The familiar face nearly broke her composure. I'm having contractions, Denise admitted quietly, leaning into Tamika's supportive grasp. She needs to sit down right now, Tamika announced with the authority that only nurses can muster. And she needs water. Officer Mercer blocked their path to the folding chair someone had brought. Nobody moves until I say so. This is still an active investigation. Investigation of what? Demanded the law professor who had spoken up earlier. Driving while black in an upscale neighborhood? She's shown you ID proving she lives here. Mercer's face reddened. There was a reported suspicious vehicle, a silver Honda Accord, interrupted a teenage boy from the back of the growing crowd. That's like the most common car ever. My mom drives one. You gonna pull her over too? Whispers rippled through the gathered neighbors. Someone mentioned filing a formal complaint. Another person was already on the phone with the local news station. The collective outrage was building by the second. Denise felt another contraction grip her midsection. This one was stronger, making her gasp. Tamika noticed immediately. How far apart are they? She asked professionally, helping Denise to the chair despite Mercer's objections. About 7 minutes, Denise replied through gritted teeth. But they're not regular. It's probably just stress, Mercer scoffed. Convenient timing. That remark earned him furious glares from everyone within earshot. I need my phone back, Denise said, eyeing her cell that Mercer had confiscated mid-conversation with her husband. My husband is on his way. Your alleged husband, Mercer corrected with a smirk. We'll see about that when he gets here. As if on cue, the first police cruiser turned onto the street, lights flashing but siren now silent. It was followed by another and another. Within moments, 5 police vehicles had arrived, forming a semicircle around the scene. The smug expression on Officer Mercer's face faltered as officers began emerging from their vehicles. These weren't regular patrol officers. These were senior officers, lieutenants, and captains, their uniforms adorned with insignia that marked their rank. What the? Mercer muttered, his hand dropping from his holster. From the lead vehicle stepped a tall, imposing figure. Even without the uniform, Anthony Wilson commanded respect with his mere presence. Tonight, dressed in his chief's uniform with gold badges catching the streetlights, he was nothing short of formidable. The crowd parted silently as Chief Wilson strode toward his wife, his face a careful mask of professional composure that did little to hide the fury in his eyes. "Denise," he said softly, kneeling beside her chair. "Are you all right?" She nodded, tears of relief streaming down her face. "The baby's kicking up a storm. I think he's as angry as his father right now." A ghost of a smile crossed Anthony's face before he turned to face Officer Mercer, who had gone pale as realization dawned. "Chief Wilson, I wasn't," he stammered. "Officer Mercer," Anthony said, his voice dangerously calm. "I believe you have my wife's phone and identification." Mercer fumbled to return the items. His earlier confidence evaporated. Anthony passed Denise's belongings to Tamika, then turned to address the officer who had held his pregnant wife at gunpoint. "I understand you pulled over a vehicle on suspicion of being involved in recent break-ins." "Yes, sir," Mercer replied, standing at rigid attention. The vehicle matched a description, a silver Honda Accord, Anthony finished for him. One of the most common vehicles in America. He glanced around at the neighbors still recording. "And despite the driver providing proper identification showing she lives in this neighborhood, you escalated to drawing your weapon on an unarmed, visibly pregnant woman." It wasn't a question, but Mercer answered anyway. "I was following protocol for suspicious. Drawing your weapon on a pregnant woman who presented no threat and was complying with your orders is not protocol." Anthony cut him off, his voice rising slightly before he reined in his emotion. "That's not how we police this community. That's not how we police any community." By now, the other senior officers had formed a loose circle around the scene. Lieutenant Grace Chen, Anthony's second-in-command, approached with a notepad. "Chief, we've already collected statements from 12 witnesses. All confirmed Dr. Wilson identified herself immediately and posed no threat at any point. 9 witnesses recorded video of Officer Mercer drawing his weapon without provocation." Anthony nodded. "Lieutenant, please secure Officer Mercer's body camera and dashboard footage immediately." Mercer shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, my camera malfunctioned earlier today. I filed the paperwork." "Convenient," someone in the crowd muttered loudly. Anthony's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Officer Mercer, surrender your badge and weapon to Lieutenant Chen. You're suspended pending a full investigation." "But sir," Mercer began to protest. "That's an order, officer." Anthony's tone left no room for argument. As Mercer reluctantly handed over his badge and gun, The crowd of neighbors broke into spontaneous applause. Anthony raised a hand to quiet them. "I appreciate everyone looking out for my wife tonight," he addressed the gathered community. "This is what neighborhood watch should be, citizens protecting each other. But I want to be clear that what happened here is not how our police department operates. This incident will be fully investigated and appropriate action will be taken." His words were measured, professional, the words of a police chief addressing concerned citizens. But everyone present could feel the deeper currents beneath. The rage of a husband whose wife had been threatened, the fear of a father whose unborn child had been endangered, and the weary resignation of a black man who knew this scene was playing out in communities across the country, without the protection his position afforded his family. While Anthony spoke, Denise felt another contraction, more intense than the previous ones. She gripped Tamika's hand, trying not to interrupt her husband's address. "I think we need to get you to the hospital," Tamika whispered, checking Denise's pulse. "Your blood pressure feels high." Anthony, attuned to his wife's every expression after 15 years of marriage, noticed immediately. He cut his speech short and was at her side in 2 strides. "Hospital?" he asked, already helping her to her feet. Denise nodded. "Just to be safe." The community mobilized with remarkable efficiency. Someone retrieved Denise's purse and medical bag from her car. The elderly neighbor offered to drive Denise's car to their house so it wouldn't be left on the street. Tamika volunteered to follow them to the hospital to provide additional medical support if needed. As Anthony carefully helped Denise into his police SUV, she caught sight of Officer Mercer standing by Lieutenant Chen's car, looking shell-shocked as his weapon and badge were logged into evidence. "What will happen to him?" Denise asked quietly as Anthony closed her door. Anthony's jaw tightened as he rounded the vehicle and slid into the driver's seat. "There will be a full investigation, but off the record, he's done. I've been pushing for department-wide reforms on racial profiling and use of force. Mercer just became the perfect example of why we need them." As they pulled away from the curb, neighbors waved and called out wishes for Denise's health. The impromptu community that had formed around one woman's distress slowly dispersed. But their phones held the evidence that would soon make this incident impossible to ignore. In the car, Anthony reached across to take Denise's hand, his thumb gently stroking her wedding ring. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Denise looked at him surprised. "For what? You came as soon as I called." "I'm sorry that being married to the chief of police still didn't protect you from this." His voice caught slightly. "I'm sorry our child has to be born into a world where this happens." Denise squeezed his hand. "Then we'll just have to change that world, one officer at a time if necessary." As they drove toward the hospital, blue lights flashing to clear their path, neither spoke of what they both knew. That tonight could have ended much differently without Anthony's position, without watchful neighbors, without the lucky coincidence of community and connection. And somewhere in the back of their minds was the question that haunted every similar incident across the nation. What about all the others who didn't have a police chief for a husband? The emergency room doors slid open with a quiet hiss as Anthony guided Denise through the entrance, his arm steady around her waist. Tamika had called ahead, so a wheelchair and a familiar face were waiting for them. "Dr. Wilson," greeted Dr. Patel, the night shift obstetrician who had been monitoring Denise's pregnancy. "Let's get you checked out right away." As they wheeled her toward the maternity ward, Denise noticed how the hospital staff looked at her differently now, not as Dr. Wilson, their colleague, but as a patient, vulnerable and in need. It was a strange role reversal for someone who usually walked these halls with authority. "Blood pressure is 150/95, announced the nurse who took Denise's vitals. "That's elevated." Dr. Patel nodded, concern etching lines in her forehead. "Let's get her on the monitor and check the baby." Anthony paced at the foot of the bed, still in his police chief uniform, occasionally stopping to answer texts and calls that kept buzzing on his phone. The incident was spreading through the department like wildfire. "Your phone's going crazy too," he told Denise, nodding at her device lighting up on the side table. "Looks like some of the neighbors posted their videos online." "It's getting attention." Denise sighed, wincing as another contraction gripped her. That was fast. "The contraction pattern is irregular," Dr. Patel noted, studying the monitor. "But they're real contractions, not just Braxton Hicks. The stress likely triggered them." She looked up at Denise. "Want to tell me what happened?" Tamika mentioned something about a police stop. While the medical team worked around her, Denise recounted the evening's events. With each detail, Officer Mercer drawing his weapon, the way he'd dismissed her medical ID, how he'd made her stand in the cold despite her obvious pregnancy, the faces of the hospital staff grew darker with anger. "That's absolutely unacceptable," Dr. Patel said, squeezing Denise's hand. "But right now we need to focus on keeping you and this baby calm. Your blood pressure is too high." A nurse appeared with medication to help relax Denise's uterus and prevent premature labor. As she administered the injection, Denise's phone rang again. This time it was her mother. "You'd better answer that," Anthony said with a half smile. "If she's calling this late, she's already seen the videos." Sure enough, Denise's mother was beside herself. "Denise Marie, why am I finding out from Facebook that my daughter was held at gunpoint? Are you all right? Is the baby okay? Where are you now? Mom, breathe," Denise soothed, falling into the familiar pattern of calming anxious family members that was part of her job as a doctor. "We're at Memorial. The baby and I are fine. Anthony is here with me." "Put my son-in-law on the phone right now," her mother demanded, her voice carrying the weight of a woman who had lived through the civil rights era and had no patience for what had happened to her daughter. Anthony took the phone, prepared for the lecture. "Hello, Mrs. Taylor." "Anthony Wilson, you promised me when you married my daughter that you would keep her safe," Mrs. Taylor began, her voice carrying clearly enough that everyone in the room could hear. "I understood the risks when you became chief. I was proud of you. But if you can't even keep your pregnant wife safe from your own officers—" "I know, Mrs. Taylor," Anthony interrupted gently. "I failed tonight. But I promise you this isn't over. The officer has been suspended. There will be consequences." "There better be," she replied firmly. "Now do I need to come down there?" Anthony looked at Denise, raising an eyebrow in question. Denise shook her head. Her mother lived 2 hours away, and there was no need for her to drive in the middle of the night. "We're okay, Mom," Denise called loudly enough to be heard. "The doctor says I just need to rest and de-stress. I'll call you in the morning." After some more reassurances, Denise ended the call only to find Dr. Patel looking at her with a stern expression. "Your mother is right to be concerned," the doctor said. "These contractions aren't stopping and your blood pressure isn't coming down. I'm admitting you overnight for observation." "But I have patients in the morning," Denise protested automatically. Dr. Patel gave her the look doctors reserve for stubborn patients. "Tonight you are the patient, Dr. Wilson. Your colleagues can cover your rounds." While Denise was being settled into a room, Anthony stepped into the hallway to take a call from Lieutenant Chen. When he returned, his expression was grim but satisfied. The dashcam footage and Mercer's body cam were both operational. Despite what he claimed, Anthony reported, Chen just reviewed them. "It's all there. Every second, including him muting his mic to make comments she described as career-endingly inappropriate." "So he lied about the camera malfunction," Denise said. "Unsurprised, yep, and that's the least of his problems right now." Anthony sat on the edge of the bed and took her hand. The mayor called. So did 3 city council members and the NACP president. The videos from the neighbors have already hit all the local news sites and are spreading nationally. "Your face is blurred in most of them, but everyone knows you're my wife." Denise closed her eyes, suddenly exhausted. "I never wanted to be the center of a viral police misconduct story." "I know," Anthony said, gently touching her cheek. "But maybe this needed to happen. I've been pushing for reform since I was appointed, hitting wall after wall of resistance. This might be the thing that finally breaks through." A nurse came in to check Denise's blood pressure again. "Still too high," she reported. "Try to rest, Dr. Wilson. We've dimmed the lights in the hallway outside your room and put up a notice to keep noise down." After she left, Anthony kicked off his shoes and settled into the recliner next to the bed. Despite Denise's protest that he should go home and get proper sleep, he refused to leave her side. "I'm not letting you out of my sight tonight," he said firmly. "Besides, the department can function without me for a few hours. Chen has everything under control." Just as Denise was finally drifting off to sleep, lulled by the medication and the steady beep of the fetal monitor, her phone buzzed with a text. It was from Tamika, who had returned to her shift in the pediatric ward. "You should see what's happening outside." Curious, Anthony went to the window and pulled back the curtain. The sight below made him catch his breath. "Denise," he called softly, "come see this." Carefully navigating her IV line, Denise joined him at the window. In the parking lot below, at least 100 people had gathered despite the late hour. Many held candles, creating a gentle sea of light in the darkness. Some held signs: "Protect Black Mothers," "Justice for Dr. Wilson," "Reform OPD now." "How did they organize this so quickly?" Denise whispered, tears filling her eyes. Anthony shook his head in wonder. "Social media. Word travels fast." He put his arm around her shoulders. "Those are your neighbors down there. Your patients and their families. Your community." As they watched, more cars arrived, adding to the gathering. News vans had set up on the periphery, their cameras capturing the spontaneous vigil. Denise's phone buzzed again with another text from Tamika. "They're asking if you can come to the window so they know you're okay." Anthony looked at Denise questioningly. "It's up to you. You don't owe them anything." Denise thought for a moment, then nodded. "Help me stand where they can see me." Anthony opened the window, letting in the cool night air and the distant sound of voices. Then he supported Denise as she stood in the window frame, one hand resting on her belly, the other raised in a small wave of acknowledgement. A cheer went up from the crowd below. Phones lifted to capture the moment. Denise stood there briefly, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support, before Anthony helped her back to bed. "Try to sleep now," he urged, closing the window but leaving the curtains open so she could see the lights below. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." As Denise settled back against the pillows, she felt the baby shift inside her. "This isn't how I wanted to introduce our child to the world they'll grow up in." "Maybe it's exactly what they needed to see," Anthony replied, sitting beside her and placing his hand on her belly. "That when something unjust happens, people can come together. That for every Officer Mercer, there are 100 neighbors willing to stand up and say, 'This isn't right.'" Outside, the vigil continued to grow, its lights reflecting against the hospital windows like stars. Inside, Denise's contractions finally began to subside, her body relaxing as the medication took effect. The baby's heartbeat on the monitor was strong and steady, untroubled by the events that had brought them here. "What are you thinking about?" Anthony asked, noticing the thoughtful expression on his wife's face. "I'm thinking about tomorrow," Denise replied. "About what happens next. About how to turn this ugly moment into something meaningful." Anthony nodded, understanding perfectly. It was why he had fallen in love with her 15 years ago. Her ability to look beyond the immediate pain to the possibility of healing, of change. "We'll figure it out together," he promised. "First, we make sure you and the baby are safe. Then we make sure what happened tonight never happens to anyone else." As Denise finally drifted off to sleep, the last thing she saw was the sea of lights below her window, a community awake and watching, bearing witness, refusing to look away. Morning light filtered through the hospital room blinds, casting thin golden stripes across Denise's bed. She woke to find Anthony already dressed in fresh clothes. Lieutenant Chen had brought him a change from home, and talking quietly on his phone by the window. "I understand the concern, Mayor Rivera, but I'd prefer to handle this internally first." Anthony's voice was professional but firm. "My wife just spent the night in the hospital. She needs time before making any public statements." Denise shifted in the bed, drawing Anthony's attention. He quickly ended the call and moved to her side. "Hey," he said softly. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Denise smiled weakly. "The contractions stopped around 3 a.m. What time is it now?" "Just past 7. Dr. Patel already came by while you were sleeping. She says your blood pressure is back to normal levels, but she wants to keep you until noon for observation." Denise nodded, relieved but also eager to return home. She reached for her phone on the nightstand and groaned at what she saw. 27 missed calls, 62 text messages, over 100 email notifications. She scrolled through them quickly. Family, friends, colleagues, reporters, even my old professor from medical school. Anthony wasn't surprised. "It's the lead story on every local news station this morning. National outlets have picked it up too." He handed her a tablet open to a news website. "See for yourself." The headline read, "Police Chief's Pregnant Wife Held at Gunpoint by Officer in Her Own Neighborhood." Below it was a still image from someone's phone video, showing Denise standing beside her car with Officer Mercer's hand near his weapon. Her face was blurred, but her pregnant belly was clearly visible. "The police department issued a statement at 6 a.m., Anthony continued. Mercer has been suspended without pay pending an investigation. Internal Affairs is already reviewing all his previous stops and arrests for patterns of racial bias. And the mayor wants me to make a statement. Denise guessed, referring to the call she'd overheard. Anthony nodded. Everyone wants to hear from you. But you don't owe them anything, Denise. Not right now. A knock at the door interrupted them. Lieutenant Chen entered, carrying a paper tray with 3 coffee cups and a bag of pastries. "Morning, Chief Dr. Wilson," she greeted them, setting the breakfast on the rolling table. "Thought you might need this. It's crazy out there." "How bad?" Anthony asked. Chen grimaced. "News vans blocking the hospital entrance. Protesters outside the police station. The mayor's called an emergency city council meeting for noon. And Officer Mercer's personnel file was mysteriously leaked online an hour ago." "Mysteriously?" Anthony raised an eyebrow. Chen shrugged. "Whoever did it covered their tracks well. But the damage is done. His history of excessive force complaints and racial bias incidents is now public knowledge. 6 similar complaints in the last 2 years alone, all swept under the rug by his previous supervisor." Denise took a sip of the tea Chen had brought her. "No coffee for the pregnant lady?" "Chamomile tea," Chen replied with a small smile. "Doctor's orders. I checked with the nurse." Despite everything, Denise found herself warming to Anthony's second-in-command. In the 3 months since Anthony had been appointed chief, Chen had been a frequent dinner guest at their home. Denise appreciated the lieutenant's straightforward manner and quiet competence. "So what happens now?" Denise asked, looking between them. Anthony and Chen exchanged a glance. "Professionally speaking," Chen began, "the department will complete its investigation. Given the evidence and witness statements, termination is almost certain. Criminal charges for excessive force and civil rights violations are being considered by the district attorney." "And unprofessionally speaking?" Denise pressed. Chen's professional demeanor slipped momentarily, revealing genuine anger. "Personally, I hope they throw the book at him. What he did was inexcusable." Anthony nodded in agreement before turning to his wife. "The real question is what you want to do. This can go several ways, Denise. We can keep your identity private as long as possible. Let the department handle it quietly." "That's not going to work," Chen interrupted. "Too many people already know. The videos are everywhere. Or," Anthony continued, "we can get ahead of it, make a statement together. Use what happened to push for the reforms I've been fighting for since my appointment." Denise was quiet for a moment, considering. As a doctor, she was used to maintaining a professional distance, keeping her personal life separate from her work. But as a black woman married to the first black police chief in the city's history, she had always known their life together would include some form of public scrutiny. "I need to talk to my department chair first," she decided. "And my patients' families should hear about this from me, not the news. I don't want them worried about their doctor." Before Anthony could respond, another knock came at the door. This time it was Dr. Patel, accompanied by the hospital administrator, Dr. Reeves. "Good morning," Dr. Reeves said, his usual confident manner somewhat subdued. "Dr. Wilson, on behalf of the entire hospital staff, I want to express our support during this difficult time." Denise could read between the lines. The hospital was concerned about the publicity, about how this incident might affect their reputation by association. "Thank you," she replied carefully. "We've issued a statement expressing our outrage at the treatment of one of our most respected physicians," Dr. Reeves continued. "And we want you to know that we'll support whatever decision you make about when to return to work." Dr. Patel stepped forward with her clipboard. "Your vitals are all normal and the baby's heartbeat is strong. The contractions have stopped completely. I'm satisfied that you can go home today, but I want you on modified bed rest for the next 48 hours. No work, minimal stress." Denise nodded, though the idea of minimal stress seemed laughable given the circumstances. As the medical team left, promising to process her discharge papers quickly, Anthony's phone rang again. He checked the screen and frowned. "It's the governor," he said, surprised. "I should take this." While Anthony stepped into the hallway, Chen helped Denise gather her belongings. "The department's arranged a security detail for you," Chen explained, handing Denise her clothes from the closet. "Just until things calm down. We can have officers stationed at your house escort you to and from work when you're ready to go back." Denise paused in the act of pulling out her shirt. "You mean police officers? After what just happened?" Chen understood the irony. "Hand selected by me. Officers with spotless records who've been vocal about the need for accountability. They're trustworthy, Denise. Denise nodded slowly. She trusted Chen's judgment, and the reality was that with all the media attention, some form of protection might be necessary. Anthony returned, looking both concerned and determined. The governor wants to meet with us today. She's coming to the hospital. The governor is coming here? Denise was stunned. Why? She says this incident has highlighted exactly what she's been trying to address with her police reform legislation. The bill has been stalled in committee for months. She thinks what happened to you could be the tipping point to get it passed. The implication was clear. The governor wanted to use Denise's experience as a political tool. Before she could respond, Denise's phone chimed with a text. It was from Tamika. You need to see this. Attached was a link to a social media post that had gone viral overnight. It showed the candlelight vigil outside the hospital, but it had grown far beyond what Denise had seen from her window last night. The video panned across hundreds of faces, people of all ages and backgrounds standing together. But what caught Denise's attention was the second video in the post. It showed patients from the pediatric ward where she worked, many still in hospital gowns, holding hand-drawn signs. We love Dr. Wilson. Protect our doctor. Kids against racism. Tears filled Denise's eyes as she handed the phone to Anthony. Look at this. As they watched the video together, Anthony's arm around her shoulders, Denise made her decision. I want to make a statement, she said firmly, not just as the police chief's wife, but as Dr. Wilson, a doctor, a mother-to-be, and a black woman who deserves to drive through her own neighborhood without fear. Anthony squeezed her shoulder. Are you sure? Once we step into the spotlight this way, it'll be hard to step back. Denise placed her hand over his. I'm sure. What happened to me happens to people every day who don't have our platform, our privilege. If we can use this moment to create real change, then we have to try. Chen nodded approvingly. I'll start making arrangements. Security, press coordination, everything. As Chen left to make calls, Anthony helped Denise finish dressing. Through the window, they could see the media presence had grown, satellite trucks and reporters standing in front of cameras. You know what's really bothering me about all this? Denise said suddenly. What? I keep thinking about how differently this could have ended if I wasn't married to you. If those neighbors hadn't started recording. If Officer Mercer had been just a little more trigger-happy. Her hand went protectively to her belly. So many ifs that could have changed everything. Anthony pulled her close, his chin resting on top of her head. I know. That's what keeps me up at night, too. They stood together in silence, watching the world outside prepare to hear their story, both acutely aware of the responsibility they now carried, not just to their unborn child, but to every family who had faced similar injustices without the protection their position afforded them. The baby kicked, as if sensing the weight of the moment, reminding them both what they were fighting for. 2 weeks had passed since that fateful night, and Denise sat in the living room of their home, Watamida, watching her husband adjust his tie in the mirror. Today marked Officer Mercer's disciplinary hearing, the culmination of an investigation that had dominated local headlines and sparked nationwide conversations about policing and racial bias. Are you sure you're up to this? Anthony asked, catching her eye in the reflection. No one would blame you for staying home. Denise smoothed her dress over her now 8.5-month pregnant belly. I need to be there, not just as your wife, but as the person this happened to. The doorbell rang and Lieutenant Chen entered a moment later, using the key they'd given her during these chaotic weeks. Chen had become their unofficial gatekeeper, managing the constant stream of media requests, well-wishers, and the occasional hate mail that had found its way to their door. Car's ready, Chen announced. Security team is in place at the station. The room will be full. Press, community leaders, police union reps. Everyone wants to witness this, Denise nodded, gathering her purse. So much had changed in 14 days. The video of her traffic stop had been viewed over 15 million times. She'd appeared alongside Anthony on national morning shows, recounting the experience in careful, measured tones, despite the rage and fear that still bubbled beneath the surface. The governor had used their story to push her police reform bill forward, breaking the legislative deadlock that had held it captive for months, and Officer Mercer had become a symbol of institutional racism to some, of unfair persecution to others. His personnel file revealed a disturbing pattern. multiple complaints of excessive force against people of color, all dismissed by his previous supervisors. The leaked records showed that Mercer had been quietly transferred to their district after problems at his last posting, a common practice that Anthony had been fighting to end. Dr. Patel called, Chen mentioned as they walked to the car. She wanted to remind you to keep your stress levels down. Said to call her immediately if you feel even a hint of a contraction. I'm fine, Denise insisted, though the baby had been particularly active this morning, as if sensing her anxiety. The drive to the police headquarters was silent, each of them lost in thought. As they approached, Denise saw the crowd that had gathered outside, protesters with signs, reporters with cameras, and ordinary citizens who simply wanted to witness a moment that had come to represent something larger than one traffic stop gone wrong. Their car pulled around to a private entrance, avoiding the main crowd. Inside, the building hummed with unusual energy. Officers nodded respectfully as Anthony and Denise passed, some offering quiet words of support, others maintaining a careful distance, uncertain where they stood in the divide this incident had created in the department. The hearing room was packed, just as Chen had warned. As they entered, a hush fell over the crowd, all eyes turning to watch Denise's careful progress to her seat in the front row. Anthony squeezed her hand before taking his place at the table reserved for command staff. The police commissioner, a stern woman in her 60s named Dr. Eleanor Washington, called the room to order. As head of the Civilian Oversight Committee, she would be leading the proceedings. This hearing will determine appropriate disciplinary action for Officer Richard Mercer regarding the incident on April 18th, she began, her voice carrying through the room without need of a microphone. Officer Mercer has waived his right to a closed hearing, so members of the public and press are permitted to observe but not participate. Denise spotted Officer Mercer sitting at a table with his union representative and lawyer. He looked smaller somehow, diminished in his dress uniform, eyes fixed on the table before him. He hadn't made a public statement since that night, advised by his lawyer to remain silent as the investigation unfolded. The proceedings began with a clinical recitation of the facts. The traffic stop, the escalation, the witnesses, the evidence. Body camera footage was played, causing a ripple of murmurs through the crowd as Mercer's aggressive tone and actions were displayed on the large screen. Denise watched herself on the video, saw her own fear, her hands protectively covering her belly, heard her voice pleading for understanding. It was surreal to watch it this way, removed from the emotion of the moment. The woman in that video seemed both herself and a stranger, part of a scene that had played out countless times across the country, though rarely with cameras rolling and rarely involving the wife of a police chief. Witness statements were read, including those from neighbors who had stopped to record and intervene. Dr. Patel's medical report detailed the physical impact of the incident, the stress-induced contractions, elevated blood pressure, and risks to both Denise and her unborn child. Throughout it all, Denise maintained her composure, one hand resting on her belly, feeling the occasional kick from the child who had been an unwitting participant in this drama. Finally, it was time for Officer Mercer to speak. His lawyer had advised against it, that much was clear from their whispered argument. But Mercer stood anyway, turning to face Denise directly for the first time. Dr. Wilson, he began, his voice hoarse. There's nothing I can say that would undo what happened that night. I was wrong. Not just in my actions, but in my assumptions, my training, my understanding of my role as an officer. Murmurs rippled through the room. This wasn't the defensive statement many had expected. I could offer excuses about stress or training or department culture, Mercer continued. But the truth is simpler. I saw a black woman in what I considered an unexpected neighborhood, and I made assumptions that reflect my own biases. Biases that were never challenged in my years of service. Biases that were sometimes even reinforced by supervisors and fellow officers. He paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. I'm not asking for forgiveness or leniency, but I'm asking that what happened be seen not as the actions of one bad apple, but as a failure of a system that allowed someone like me to carry a badge and gun, despite multiple warning signs. The room was completely silent now, the assembled crowd hanging on every word of this unexpected confession. I've submitted my resignation from the force, Mercer concluded, but I know that's not enough. I'm committed to working with community organizations focused on police reform, sharing my experience as an example of why change is needed. That's all, thank you. He sat down amid stunned silence. His lawyer looked mortified. The union representative resigned. Anthony's expression remained professionally neutral, but Denise could see the surprise in his eyes. After a brief deliberation, Dr. Washington announced the committee's decision. Officer Mercer's resignation was accepted, his pension revoked, and the case would be referred to the district attorney for potential criminal charges. Additionally, a full audit would be conducted of all officers transferred into the department over the past 5 years, looking for similar patterns of misconduct. As the hearing concluded and people began to file out, Denise found herself face to face with Mercer in the narrow hallway. For a moment, neither spoke. "I meant what I said in there," Mercer said finally, his eyes meeting hers briefly before dropping to the floor. "It doesn't fix anything, but I wanted you to know." Denise studied the man who had pointed a gun at her and her unborn child. "You're right. It doesn't fix anything, but what happens next might. That's up to you." As Mercer nodded and walked away, Anthony appeared at Denise's side. "You okay?" "Yes," she said, surprised to find it was mostly true. "What do you think about what he said in there?" Anthony considered the question carefully. "I think it's a start. A small one. The real test will be what happens after the headlines fade and the cameras leave." Outside, they faced the assembled press together. Anthony stepped to the microphones first, delivering a measured statement about accountability and change, about the steps already being taken within the department. Then he introduced Denise. She hadn't planned to speak, but looking out at the sea of faces, journalists, activists, ordinary citizens drawn by an extraordinary moment, she felt compelled to find her voice. 2 weeks ago, I was just a doctor and an expecta. At Mother, she began. Today, I stand here as a symbol of something much larger, but I need to be clear. What happened to me is not unique. The only unique thing is that my husband's position forced people to pay attention. She paused, one hand resting on her belly. My child will be born into a world where this conversation is finally happening in the open. But for meaningful change, we need more than conversation. We need action. We need accountability. And we need to remember all the names we don't know. All, the people who didn't have cameras recording or powerful spouses or viral videos to make their voices heard. As she stepped back from the microphones, the baby delivered a particularly strong kick, as if in approval. Anthony's arm encircled her waist, and together they walked to their waiting car, past the crowds and cameras, heading home. That evening, sitting on their porch swing watching the sunset, Denise felt the first real contraction of labor begin. With perfect timing, their child had waited for this chapter to close before beginning their own story. "Anthony," she said calmly, "it's time." As he helped her to her feet, phone already in hand to call Dr. Patel, Denise looked out at their neighborhood, the same streets where she'd been held at gunpoint just 2 weeks ago. But tonight she saw it differently. She saw the houses where neighbors had come out to stand with her. She saw the community that had rallied around them in their darkest moment. And she saw the future, challenging and imperfect, but possible, that they were building. One difficult conversation, one policy change, one honest confrontation at a time. Their child would be born into a world still struggling with the weight of history and injustice, but also a world where people were increasingly unwilling to look away, to accept the unacceptable, to remain silent in the face of wrong. It wasn't enough. But it was a beginning.